Alright, so this video I'm continuing after the last one that I just made for my friend, helping him with setting up quick and dirty UVs and putting a logo on the model. On this video, I am going to talk about surface and adding your own texture to it once you have a UVed model to put your own texture on there. So this is surface under geometry. So the first thing you need is a texture. So I found this thing on the internet. Now, this is just a scale pattern. You can make this any number of ways. You can make it in Zbrush, you can make it in Photoshop, you can make it in another 3D package. It needs Z height, so it needs Z depth, right? So you can see how it goes from black to white. And it needs to tile. So as long as it tiles in X and Y and you have Z depth information, you're good to go. Now this one in particular that I downloaded, I discovered is pointing in the wrong direction for what I'm looking for. And I want to talk about the UVs and stuff. So if I go under Z plugin and we look at the UVs on this guy again. Oh wait, let me go to the lowest subdivision level. And we flatten this out. I guess I need to not have UVs. So I got two duplicates of these anyway, so let me just delete higher on this one so we can look at this and talk about it. Z plugin, flatten. Alright, let me hide this one. Alright, so we have these UVs, and you can see it orientation wise, they're pointed up, right? So the dog's head is pointed up, the tail is pointed down. And if I look at this texture, the scales are kind of in the reverse direction that you would expect them to be on the body of a snake or a dragon or whatever. You would want them to be pointed down. So when I applied these as surface detail on the model, they were pointing in the wrong direction. So obviously that's the orientation that it's using. So you need to make sure that you know the direction that your UVs are flowing, and that is the general flow that you want the texture to tile on the model. Now this organic model is going to be very hard where the texture seams are, and I'll show you that in a second, where you're going to have a really hard time covering up the edges, because they're not going to line up perfectly with the texture. Because you could imagine this texture is just going to spread across this UV space, and it's not going to literally end at the edge of the paw and pick up at the other edge of the paw over here, or on the other side of the arm here. It's not going to loop around. So you're going to just get it tiling across, and they're not going to line up, and you're going to get nasty seams. Now this can be done strategically to where if you had your model broken up into polygroups and you gridded this out where you were actually making UVs, say, in another program and not in Zbrush, you could get it very clean and super close to having perfect seams where this would tile perfectly across the model and you would barely even see it. In this particular example, this is a bad example for using this type of a texture. But, for example, I'm going to do it in a second, if this dog had armor or it had chunks of its body that were visible that you wanted to have scales, like scale armor, that would be perfect for this, and I can show you how to do that as well. So let me just get into that really quick. So let me unflatten him. Alright, I'm just going to delete this one. We'll go back to this high poly one. And this was pretty high poly because the last video that I made, I needed lots of verts for poly paint. So I'm going to go down a little bit. And then, let me not use that texture. I'm in my standard brush, dots. Right now it's got RGB. I don't really need anything specific on this. I'm just going to make actually let me under stroke type, I'm going to pick lasso, and I'm just going to grab a chunk of this as if I was making armor. Oh, and let me turn perspective off because that could have not been symmetrical there. Alright, so I'm just going to extract that really quick. So under extract, just click this and see a preview. That's looking kind of crappy. I'm going to up this number. That's a little bit smoother. Let me turn this button on here. That's a lot smoother. Okay, and then the thickness is maybe a little too much. We'll just have that. And that's fine, except, alright, let me get rid of this. So now, oop, I did duplicated it by accident. Delete that. Alright, so I have this other model here. Let's say we wanted the scales to go on this thing, okay? So first I have to unwrap this. So we're going to solo it. And I'm probably going to Z-remesh it because it's very high poly. So if I turn this on, you can see there's a lot of polygons there. I mean, actually, this would UV fine, and I don't need to go lower than this, but I'm going to do it just because. So under Z-remesh, I am going to say, let's see here, I want half. So adaptive doesn't really matter here. This is almost all uniform, so who cares? Z-remesh. Should have paused the video here so you're not watching it Z-remesh real time. Alright, so that's a little bit better, but I'm going to go even further. I'm going to pause the video until I get this to a lower part where I like it. Alright, so I pressed it a couple more times, and this is looking a little bit better. The issue that I have now is it's got like weird extra loops here. So I'm going to go into ZModeler, and with the ZModeler brush selected, I'm going to hover over an edge, hold spacebar, and I'm going to say collapse, polyloop. So now I can hold over an edge and then just drag in a direction, and it should let me... Why is it doing it? There must be spiraling. Okay, so if there's spirals, that's a little bit more tricky. I'm going to pause the video again while I Z-remesh this a few more times to get it even lower. Alright, so this thing I Z-remeshed a few more times, and you can see we got this. There are a bunch of nasty spirals, so the way to get rid of that is it has thickness right now, and I didn't even need this. So what I should have done is started originally from the base one and deleted all the other polygroups except for a shell, and then extruded it after. That's the smart way to go. I didn't do that because I was being lazy. But as you can see here, the spirals only go so far, and then I'm left with this. And this actually has a better shape for me in terms of like a piece of armor because it's got a nice sharp edge. So with that piece hidden, I'm just going to say auto group, and let's see, auto group again, and then now you can see we have a couple of pieces here. So I don't need this outer part, so I'm just going to show this pink piece, and I'm going to turn double-sided on so we can see it, and then I'm just going to delete hidden, and you can find that under modify topology, delete hidden. I have a button for it because I use it so much. Alright, so now that I have this, I need to UV this, and the underside I would imagine wouldn't have scales anyway, so I'm not going to worry about UVs on the underside of this. Actually let me go to my ZModeler, and then under here I'm going to hold over a face, and I'm going to say QMesh, polygroup all, and then I'm just going to drag this out a little bit. Now you can see it automatically made polygroups for me. It gave me a nice hard edge. Let me turn the dog back on because I want to see if it's floating. It's floating a little bit, but that's actually pretty realistic for how it would sit on an animal. Alright, so we have that. And let me go back to solo mode here. So now we need to UV this thing. So what's nice is we already have polygroups here, and I don't really care what's on the edge. So I'm just going to let the scales run all the way to the edge. Now if this was a piece of armor, you'd think maybe there'd be a trim around it or something. You could very easily, through ZModeler, mess with this edge here to create like an extrusion and then an edge border and blah blah blah. That's a whole other tutorial. So I'm not going to get into that, but know that you can do that. One thing that I want to point out here is that ZModeler will blow away UVs. So if you had UV'd this thing and then you went to extrude this in ZModeler, it's going to kill your UVs. So that's why I did this first instead of doing the UVs first. Even though I don't necessarily need to UV the whole thing, I only need to UV the top. ZModeler would have killed my UVs. So let's turn that off, and we're going to go into the plugin, UV Master. I've got polygroups turned on. That's important. Symmetry is good to have turned on. Actually, you know what? I'm going to make sure this thing is symmetrical because I Z-remeshed it. So it's probably not symmetrical. So under modify topology, I'm going to mirror and weld. Yeah, you can see it wasn't symmetrical. So now the thing is totally symmetrical. We should be good to go. This is a little wonky. And we can fix that really quick. Let me undo that, and I am going to rotate the model. This is a little trick. This might actually fix this and make me not have to do anything specific. You can just mirror. So I just mirrored it, and then I'm going to try this again, and that looks good. Perfect. All right, so we have this. Go into Z plugin, make sure polygroups are turned on, symmetry is turned on, unwrap. Now this should be super easy and straightforward. It should look very clean because of the way this is made. Flatten. Yep, perfect. So you can see I have the two different, the top, the bottom, and then the little strip. If I was doing this in another program, I would want this strip to not be wavy. I would make it a complete grid and make it perfectly flat. I would flatten this area out here and flatten that out here, and then leave these kind of organic. But again, for this particular demonstration and for why I'm making this for a friend, this doesn't really matter. Now, in the UV space, you can see this grid. Now, if I want these to take up more space, because look at how little space they're taking, what I can do here is modify the UVs. So this is something that I didn't get into in the other video, but if I want to modify these, it's just like polygroups and polypainting and selection, and it's just like using anything else in Zbrush. It's really a nice way to work. So what I'm gonna do is hide that one. I don't even remember if the red one was on top or the bottom, whatever. Actually, you know what? I need to know that. So Z plugin, unflatten. Okay, so the red one's on the bottom, the green one's on top. The green one's really the only thing that I need. So the rest of them can get squashed down into nothing. So Z plugin, flatten. All right, so this one doesn't matter. This one doesn't matter. This is the one that matters. So I am going to take my scale tool, and I'm just going to drag it here, and then I'm going to hold shift and just drag this thing up, and then go to move tool and move this into the space. Okay, that's probably good enough. It doesn't need to be perfect. Let me unhide these other two. We'll hide this one now, and then I'll just move these two out of the way, and I'll just turn this on. Ooh, I hate this gizmo. Let's see, undo that, home, reset orientation, lock. Okay, it's such a wonky tool. It's great, but it's wonky. I wish they would improve it. Anyway, move those up there. Do this. There we go. That's all perfect. UVs are great. So now we go Z plugin, unflatten, boom. Now we have great UVs on this thing, and we can make scales. Oh, so also going back to the scale thing, you can see the scales pointing up here. I'm going to have to either fix that or flip the UVs. So if I go back in here and I flatten, you can see that the orientation that we want the scales to flow is opposite of this now. So if you were lazy and you didn't want to go in and edit the model, which maybe I will here for this tutorial, actually it flipped it on me, look at that. Well, we'll see. We'll see how the orientation on this goes. If I have to flip it, I'll show you how to do that as well. Unflatten, so we have our model here. So now we're going to need to, well, I'm going to crease it because this is armor. So rather than like letting this jelly bean, see how it's going to round it out? I don't want that, so I'm going to go under crease. I'm going to just click the crease button, divide, divide, and now 2 I think should be good enough to hold that and give it a little bit of a soft edge on the edge. So I'm going to say uncrease all, divide, divide. 5 subdivision levels should be enough. I mean, maybe we'll have to go to 6, I don't know. All right, so we have this. Now here's the meat of the tutorial and what this is all about. So now I want to go into surface, and we're going to click noise. And you'll see initially when you start this out, you just get this sort of noise pattern. We don't want that. So what we want is, first of all, UVs. So now you're seeing it's doing this weird grid. And then we click alpha on off. And then we load that texture. Give it a second. And we don't want to mix with noise. We just want the texture. So I turn that to off. And then alpha scale, so I can change the scale. And actually it's oriented properly, so it did flip the UVs or whatever, the way I was oriented or I was looking at it. It actually just happens to be a happy accident and going in the right direction. If you didn't want it to be going in this direction or the other direction, you can either, in Photoshop or whatever, flip this texture, or in the UVs that I'd flattened out, you can rotate it all the way, or 180, and that would fix it too. You can't really edit it here. I would hope that you could use these tools down here to like rotate this texture, but it doesn't. This is like purely for the 3D space, like the box projection. That's what these affect. So it'd be nice if these actually affected the UV projection of this as well, but they don't. So you'd have to edit it outside of this to get it to work properly. Anyway, so that scale looks pretty good. Let's let me see. So you can go negative scale or positive scale. Obviously positive scale is wrong, so let's go negative scale here. I'm going to go path of least resistance. This can be tricky to see exactly how much this is going to protrude out. So we might have to, and you can see, so the UVs that I moved, see how I moved this one to fill up more space, and it's tiling nicely and it's small. But then when I rotate down here, it's like super big, and it's on the edges too. We don't want that. We don't want it to project on these, and I'll show you how to fix that too. But just for the purposes of this right now, it's just a bump map. It's not real. So this looks good to me. I'm going to say OK. And you can see a preview of it here. This looks pretty good. But I don't want to project it to the other parts of the model. I just want it on the top. So I'm just going to hide the rest of it with this shown. And then I'm just going to say apply to mesh. Now you can see that's pretty low polygon and it's kind of ugly. So we're going to need to subdivide this some more. So I'm going to undo that, and then I'm going to unhide the whole model, and then I'm going to divide this like, I don't know, maybe, let me see what the polygon count is on this. It's not bad. We can go up a little bit more. So I'll go up one more. Okay, and then go back to this, and then apply to mesh. That's pretty good, and it's actually not bumping out like way too much. Like, so one thing you can do to play with this, so you don't have to keep going back and forth and undoing, is you can unhide the whole thing, and then just go to layers. Where's my layers on here? Layers. Okay, make a new layer, and before you apply it, you've got your new layer. Only show part of the model that you want to apply it to the mesh, and now that we have a layer, I can stop recording on that one, and then I can just like duplicate the layer, and you can see it intensifies it, right? What's cool about that is like, let's say this is a little too much of what you wanted. Like, this is too much because it's kind of like pillowing a little bit. It looks a little cartoony. Maybe you wanted it to be a little bit less than this, but this wasn't enough. So what you can do with this now is you have layer opacity, so you can like tune this. You can see it's less or more. So it's cool. That's really nice thing to have in layers. So I'll get it to there, whatever. That looks good enough. And then you can just say bake all. Boom, it's gone. Okay. So now you can see also here why I said it would be good to have trim. You can see that it cuts off hard on the UV border there. If you had made a separate trim piece that was a separate subtool, that would be covering that up. And that's why doing this on the dog model is going to look kind of wonky, is because you're going to have a seam line like that, and I'll show you that in a second. But anyway, so this is the process for making scales on a piece of geometry. Now let's do it to the dog as well, just so you can see what I was talking about earlier. So we'll turn that off. And then you can see the dog has got, some scale armor. Pretty quick and easy to do. So now let's go back to the dog here, and we're going to do the exact same thing on the dog. And actually, I can fix the UVs on him too, but I'll have to, I will have to delete the subdivision levels. So delete higher. So now we have the low poly. Let's go surface, noise, and we're going to turn alpha on, pick the texture, get rid of mix basic noise, up the strength, and you can see now it's like really oriented wrong. This is definitely not what we want. It's like not even, last time I did it, it seems like it's arbitrary, I guess, or maybe it's dependent on how the orientation is of the model going into this. If that's true, that's something that I never even noticed until just now. Let's see if that's true. So let me start the dog out here. Actually, you know what? I think it would be like this to make it work properly. And we'll solo him. And we'll turn noise on. And we're going to turn the alpha back on. Turn the mix basic noise off. Increase the strength. Nah, it's still doing the same thing. All right, so that it just seemed to happen to do this random orientation wise in terms of like how this is applying. Last time it went from back to front, like flipped from the tail to the head. Now it's doing it from top to bottom. No idea why. Oh wait, 3D. That's why. Okay, that's just me being too fast on this and not paying attention. So right now it's using 3D projection. And what that's doing is it's like a box projection, top, down, side, whatever. And if I scale this down, you can see that it's like mirroring in a weird way, and it's stretching, and that might be good. Like, this might actually work for you depending on what you're doing. Like, if you were going to put like something on his back to cover that up and hide that, that might actually work. But we want UVs, so I'm going to turn UVs on, and now you can see it's exactly what I was talking about before. So it's flowing from the tail to the head, and that's because of his UVs. So two ways to fix this, like I said. One way to fix it is to go in with this texture, flip this, right, and then export this back out and save it, or go into Photoshop, whatever program you want to use, and save it out. That's one way to do it. Or if you don't want to mess with anything 2D and you want to just do it all in 3D, you can go into Zbrush plugin, under UV Master, flatten him, and then all you really have to do is rotate this way. And I'm holding Shift to snap it. Make sure that it's all 1-to-1 so that it's inside the box. And it is. I'm just going to move it in the middle a little bit better. All right, and then go back here, unflatten, and this should be perfect on him now in Surface. So we go back here. It sucks that you have to do this every time where it's not like remembering. I keep assuming that it's going to remember, and that's why I left the 3D on there and not UVs. But anyway, we click on alpha. I decided never had applied it, so it's not remembering. Anyway, so we load that up. We get the mixed noise off, and then we're going to increase the strength. And now you can see it's pointed in the right direction. And let's turn the alpha scale down. So now you can see here, this actually looks, you know, fairly convincing and pretty good. But you can see down the back, because there's a split there, it almost lines up, but not quite. And you can see that that's going to look maybe a little nasty. Now you could finesse this after you apply it to the model. You could smooth it out with a brush. You could like pinch tool it. You can go in and manually clean it. It won't be the most perfect solution to fix this. If you really wanted this to be perfect and use this method, I would suggest not using it on organic models that you have to do it across the whole surface. Or like if this was a snake, it would be a lot easier because you could make it just a grid and then do the head individually. So you'd like cut it at the neck, and then you would make individual scales that you would place on the head separately. But this is a great like base if you wanted to start from this, and then you could add stuff on top of it to work from. It's a big time saver. So this is looking pretty good. Let's just say OK. So now we have it on this model. And also let me go onto the legs too, because this is another area that I'd mentioned before. So let me see if I can find an actual texture seam here. It's hard with the facets. I haven't subdivided him at all. Where is the seam on him? Is it on the front? I bet it's on the front. It's always going to be in the worst possible spot. Yep, right here, right down the front. See, you can see this doesn't line up. It's kind of ugly. When it applies, you're going to get like a really harsh strip there that you'd have to go in and clean up everywhere. So yeah, again, I don't recommend doing this method with like really quick and dirty UVs unless you're doing something like the piece of armor that I made. This is ideally what you would use this for. On an organic model like this dog, it's much more tricky, and you have a lot more cleanup work to do if you're just doing it like the quick and dirty way. But anyway, I'm not going to bother applying it to the dog just because this is really what I think is the most important thing. So hope this video helped, and yeah, that's it. It's getting a little long.